Let me just conclude by what I think is going on here in this democratic recession. We see some common causes of democratic breakdown and erosion that I think highlight some key issues that we'll be exploring in the class. First of all, again, to underscore that point, that the erosion is happening most dramatically where the rule of law is weakest. We see that the breakdowns of democracy are occurring where democracy is least liberal, where the rule of law is weakest, constraints on executive authority are weakest. And therefore, if the constraints are weak, it's human nature, I regret to say, that people are going to try and fill the vacuum by aggrandizing their power. This is why we have these constraints. This is why our constitutional founders in the United States were so concerned to limit the power of the president and keep that person from becoming a tyrant or a monarch. The third element is severe polarization on some kind of lines. Usually you can see the political parties separating into mutually incompatible camps, not trusting one another, not being willing to compromise, fearing that if one wins, they'll wipe out the other. So you've got the inverse of the kind of culture I'm going to talk about soon next week. Polarization on ethnic, religion, or some kind of identity lines, reinforcing this. And think about this in the American context now, if you will. The fourth element is weak and often also politically poorly designed institutions. So political parties aren't strong, they don't command much popular support. And then you've got, fifth, the social and economic development aspect that we'll be talking about in the course as a major element, that democratic breakdown is just more likely and democratic transition is less likely in circumstances of severe poverty, small middle class, extreme inequality, and so on. And this tends to give rise to worse levels of governance, weaker state capacity, broader corruption, and so on. Now, if you got lots of corruption, violence, abuse of power, corruption, injustice, inequality, what are people going to think of their political system? They're going to lose faith in it. And it's that loss of legitimacy that really opens the gateway to the failure of democracy, either by executive coup, rapid or incremental, military coup, or some other means, which is why we're going to turn next Tuesday, we've got to get there quickly, to the question of legitimacy and its importance. And later in the course, we'll come to these international factors. Any questions before we close? I do. I really do. This is something that gives me some hope about the current period. And maybe so, it's Thursday, the weekend, we know the weekend starts tonight for you guys. So, maybe I should leave on a hopeful note here in two respects. First of all, I see rising congressional concern again. I think we are in a very creative period, possibly like the mid-1970s in more respect than one. But the one I have in mind is rising congressional assertiveness about human rights and the defense of democratic norms, and now some of the concern about these other factors, including the expansion of external authoritarian sharp power projection. We'll get into that. And the second thing that gives me hope is that I see strong bipartisan elements to this, both Republicans and Democrats really saying our foreign policy has got to be about more than just supporting Saudi Arabia because they're a big oil state. Okay, have a good weekend.